So I will get us started. Phil, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I want to welcome you to my platform that I call the Confidence Zone. I'm Susan Axelrod, the Confidence Coach. I have been involved and engaged in the world of philanthropy and fundraising since I was 22. My first job out of college came, as many did in the day, by accident. I was in a graduate program in international affairs at George Washington University. I did not have a facility for languages, and I knew that that would hold me back as well as other things. So I went to my Hebrew professor, Max Tickton, and I cried. And I said, I want to stay in DC, but I'm going to have to leave the program. Long story short, he came back to me at some point within weeks and said, I have a job for you. And I said, I'll take it. And he said, do you want to know what it is? It turned out to be, the title was Campaign Administrator for a capital campaign that the George Washington University Hillel was having. I, of course, had never been in fundraising before, but he told me, you have all the personal characteristics that it takes and personality. And so for $20,000 a year, I was ecstatic to start my fundraising career. Within moments, I got my certificate in fundraising, which happened to be offered at George Washington University. And I have been in the field of fundraising, now I call it philanthropy, for many, many, many years. So Phil, what I want to say to you is you have provoked me. And that's why I wanted to
good have...
or bad? Well, it's good and bad, but regardless, that's why I wanted to have this conversation today. Phil, I've known about you for decades. You know, I've followed your career. I've watched the CAP. I thought about getting the CAP. It didn't work for me for various reasons. But as you have now come into what I might call your next chapter, I see that you are asking provoking questions for us in the industry to actually think. And one of my transformation tips is think more. And so I want to say thank you for getting us to think. And then the place that I thought I'd like to start with you is to offer you an opportunity to share with us a little bit about, you know, leaving the CAP and coming to where you are today.
Okay, well, I guess I should probably start by saying what CAP is. CAP is a curriculum offered by the American College to both fundraisers and advisors, and it's been going on since about 2001. I was the chair of that from like 2009 until very recently. And over that period of time, we've trained to educate about 2,500 people, about half advisors and half nonprofit people. And it started out mostly advisors. Now it's about 50-50. And the idea is to bring people together in common purpose to better serve people that some of us call clients and some call donors. And so it's planned giving, but more like gift planning, where you prioritize the human being on the other side of the table and try to help them do what's right, recognize that none of us can do it all. And I think that's really the key to a lot of this, to bigger gifts is, you know, advisors are either going to play offense or defense, but they're going to be involved. And if they're not included as colleagues and allies and friends, if they're not playing against a ball themselves, they can actually defeat the legacy intentions. So that's been the spirit of it. And you know, I did it for a long time and I was very excited about it. And one of the things I like best is that it evolved into local study groups and study groups of affinity. Including, I was just telling Susan, a Jewish philanthropy study group that's starting, and there's an Advisors of Color one, and there's, you know, about 10 or 15 different cities at any given time they're doing them, where people are getting together locally and nationally to hash out how can we better collaborate to better serve the people we're working with. But the inherent tension in being an academic is that, you know, you're teaching to exams, you're teaching, giving people grades, and you look around this room here. I mean, do you really, you know, would you want me to be giving them a grade? I mean, it's a necessary evil. That's right. First of all, it starts being an insult to you. It's an insult to me as well. Okay. So there's just something insulting. And then you get into the mechanics of grading people, which involve objective tests and things like that. And so you're really killing the spirit to save the letter. And people would say to me things like, you teach us what we need to know and you test us as best you can, which was a kind way of saying this is all screwed up. So I've reached a point now where it's really incumbent on me, and really important to me, not to compete with CAP, but to complete it by emphasizing what can we actually do to overcome some of the systemic dysfunctions in our field. So after 20 years of doing this, if somebody would ask me, and somebody recently did, are people collaborating more than they used to? The answer is no. I mean, it was a convenient, rhetorical convenience to sell CAP courses, and it makes a pretext for us to get together. But when is the last time you ever referred a donor to an advisor? Zero. It's never happened in your entire life. Okay, and never will. You'll drop dead before it happens. So I'm teaching collaboration will never happen. And likewise, what percentage of advisors have actually made a constructive impact on a giving plan you've worked with, as opposed to just being a scrivener? Or even being an obstacle. So it's reached the point now where it's kind of urgent to me to actually resolve some of these issues as best I can. So I'm developing new materials. I'm in the process of doing kind of shorter versions of some of the things I've taught, but really doing it from the standpoint of, will you integrally do this, or are we just we just spitting in the wind? I mean, are we going to bless this idea, or are we going to act on this idea? So I think there's tremendous opportunities. I really think there's a tremendous opportunity. We're talking about Jewish philanthropy. I think there's opportunities any organization has to do better by recognizing that the day the advisor does, look at your biggest donor decides to make a big gift, they talk to their advisor, they talk to their spouse, they talk to their advisor, and you're not part of that conversation. So, I'm saying, and I think the other megatrend that's driving this is boomers retiring, and baby boomers with businesses are the biggest single source of wealth. That's the non-cash assets thing. And if you look at Brian Cloutz, he moved over $1 billion of non-cash gifts to various charities last year. And the median size of these gifts is like $2 million. So you're in the bulk of the balance sheets of wealthy families is closely held businesses. I mean, it's like 40% of the top 1%'s wealth is in closely held businesses. You can't even begin to touch that without advisors. And if you do, you're in such a liability mess that you should never have gotten involved. You're just, you're cruising for a bruising. So I guess I'm at the point where I'm really trying to call, we'll take Jewish philanthropy, for example. How many Jewish business owners give every year, and how many are selling their business for the next 5 years? It's an enormous number. And if Jewish community foundations are not involved in that, Jewish federations of foundations, it's going to go elsewhere. It's going to go through Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard, and you're going to lose control completely, and you'll not even know what happened. So anyway, that's kind of my passion. I think what I'm trying to do now is to kind of call the question and get more practical, by using the same principles of convening people across our disciplines, often locally or by tradition, and challenge ourselves to do something constructive in the next 30 days. So it's an action challenge, as opposed to by the end of this course, you'll pass the exam. Right. Which is really kids. I mean, I'm way too old to be doing that. And all my students are way too old. And that was just a convenience to get a college to sponsor it.
I mean, that's interesting because as you're talking, I have to admit to myself that I would have become a CAP, but I don't test well. Well, so I know that's an old limiting belief.
Yeah, we could have worked that out with you. But I think the main point really is you have more to offer than to learn, so to speak. And what we really need is a pooled resource of highly qualified people who are trading ideas to create a new body of best practices that overcome the dysfunction that we all see every day. And it's almost like that parable of the long table, long handled spoons. I think it's actually a Jewish parable.
It is indeed. Honestly, Phil, that is what we are doing today. And as I watched and engage, some people say they hate social media. I love social media because I'm actively engaged with it for my business on behalf of humanity. And so as I watched you put out these provoking questions that I had to then think about, and I went to your website and read through the hot topics where you're really encouraging us to think more and think deeper about these things. That's why I invited you to have this conversation. I would like to say that I was on contract as the director of plan giving with a local hospital for 15 years. And in that time, I created what I called the Legacy Council of Advisors, which grew to be 100 members. Because over time, one by one, I did this, I recruited, I talked, and I brought them in to give them information about the hospital, all the health related things at the hospital that they needed to know for themselves and their clients. And then I think about 20 of them actually became legacy donors to the hospital, not at the highest levels, but I recruited, you know, I offered them the opportunity. So I am 100% on board. I'm on the philanthropy side. My career is planned giving, major gifts planned giving, but finding advisors who actually care about this aspect, that's where I worked to bring it together, because their clients do care. That's something we know for sure.
That's exactly right. And we're absolutely well, congratulations on doing that. I think that's really important. And, you know, that wave of energy has come and gone across a lot of nonprofits have had these advisory councils, and then they gets to be more work, and then they start repeating their topics, and, you know, it takes staffing time to do it, and you look for the payoff and it isn't always there. So congratulate you on having made that work.
Well, thank you. And that, to me, that was the work, but I want to credit the woman who hired me, Terry Lee, because she basically said, come on board, do this. And she didn't make me do any annual mail appeals. She didn't make me go to the golf event. She didn't make me do anything else. I focused only on this. This was my world of work, between sitting for hours with donors, elderly people, and listening to them, and then on the other side with the advisors as well. I'm very interested in the aspect of conversation, Phil, that you're bringing out. I couldn't agree more about the idea of having, you know, bringing together, convening, as we're doing here today. This is exactly what we're doing, to converse and to cross over those barriers. But we do have an obstacle to overcome, and that is, as you and I mentioned briefly in our email exchange, quotas, metrics, analytics, etc. And so people who are on the planned giving side or the gift planning side, on the organizational side, are now having to do things in a way that might kind of contradict exactly what it is that you're talking about.
There's absolutely no doubt. And I was interested in kind of following your conversations with Jim Langley, because obviously he is probably I would have to say the leading exponent these days of this more relationship-based, you know, and you can see the world in which he's operating is in a target-rich environment with these big universities and colleges, and you know, principal gifts, I guess, really is what amount to, right?
It is indeed. And Jim and I have had many of these conversations as well. And if you follow what he's doing on social media, he is single-handedly offering us thought leadership that I encourage anyone to find and read and think more about.
There's no doubt about it. I think he's outstanding, but I think he's part of a tradition that I think there's a latent tradition going back to Dunlop. You know,
of course,
you put 25 people rather than 250 people a year and ask what you can do for them. That's what he meant by moves management. He didn't mean stalking, just what it's been come to mean. But he meant really thinking about every one of those 25 people every day and say, what's the next thing I can do for them to build to tighten their relationship with the college or whatever school he represented.
So a few things.
Amazing, right? He's like the concierge is what he was.
That's exactly right.
The professor, do they want to go to the football game? Can I get them tickets? You know, that kind of stuff. And it paid off huge.
I am old enough to have taken a course with Dave Dunlop.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. And then Jerry Panis was someone I followed for years. I took his coursework. And I really think that the evolution of all the, you know, data management, moves management became data management, data moves management.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in fairness, I'm trying to work on a course now for advisors and fundraisers. It'll be a short action course, but it's calling the question: why are we doing this? In other words, what is the if I were to show if we were able to do this successfully, what does successful mean? So, as an example, in Omaha, we're about 100 advisors, or maybe 75, have gone through the CAP program over 10 years. They can document 9 billion of legacies that came across their desks. They say would not have gone to philanthropy had they not, been sensitized to philanthropy. $9 billion. Now that's a lot of money. That's success. But if you ask the person who convened it, he was a very, very successful financial advisor, and I actually went out to dinner with him and his wife too. At one point, he was kind of amusing, and I said to her, thank you for letting me work with Mark, several, couple hours a week. And she looked at me and said, you have no idea. A couple hours a week does not even begin. He teaches it 2 hours a week. He studies it 10 hours a week for 10 years. And this is a guy, when you went to his building is bigger than the American College. I thought he rented a space. He owns the building. Okay. So once you work out what is his time worth per second, and he gave literally 10 years of himself to this course. And I asked him, Mark, how much money have you made out of this? How many sales? He said 0. It was never my intention. It never happened. This is my give back.
Yeah.
So for him, it was a huge success. It's a nationally known success. But, there's a whole group of other people underneath who have to pay their bills, who would if they could, and would do it and are feeling honestly, the kind of example you gave of people who are driven and derided by metrics and have to do the wrong thing every day because they're told to do it wrong, and they have to report back to it sure they did do it wrong. How do we work with people who are at a age and stage of their career where they're following directions laid down by others, either directly or indirectly through compensation schemes like advisors on commission, assets under management, and they need to hit a certain amount per week to stay in business, feed their families. That's the group where I think it's the next level down. I'm not sure if I can do it or not, but that's where I like trying to focus is that I would if I could, people, but I can't. And then see if we can change some of the conditions in which they operate, or at least teach them how to there's a wonderful quotation from William Blake that's directly on point. He says, there's a moment in every day that Satan's watch fiends cannot find. And by saying he meant metrics. Okay. He literally specifically
there you go again.
Yeah, he literally meant it because he was in England at the time they began to make factories and time clocks and punching in and punching out. He saw that coming in his soul.
So he literally meant it.
I
thought you were saying euphemistically.
He literally meant it, but he didn't use the word metrics. It was a spirit of logic and reason in treating people as things. He saw the English commons become broken up into plots of land, then smoke belching factories built on. He lived in that era. And so when he says a moment every day that St. Philosophy is going to find, he meant we can still find eternity between two beats of the heart, right? We can find a turning grain of sand. So even if you have only the time it takes to stir the cup of coffee at the beginning of an interview, there's enough time to touch somebody's heart. But we have got to get it down to that because the Jim Langley process is not, unfortunately, is not going to work for 99% of fundraisers. Their companies will college. They don't have the donors to support it. They are not given the time to do it. And the payoff is outside even the tenure of the fundraiser with the organization.
Right. That's another thing that happened to me. I was with that one hospital for 15 years, and a couple of years after I left, 2 directors later, the new director contacted me and told me about a $750,000 gift that came in from one of the donors I had worked with so long ago. I knew her, I knew all my donors, but it was really more than 10, 12 years later that it came in, and my tenure was done with the organization.
Exactly. So you're getting the credit for the work of people who are now long gone and perhaps long dead. And
right.
the organization has to sponsor that process of seeding and pruning and cultivation and harvest, but we're now much more of a time clock mentality of I'm paying you X, I've got to recover it in time, you're here times 2, so that means the more often you ask, the more often you get, the more you ask for, so it's a sales mentality, and it's a low-level sales mentality. The thing that impresses me about it, I taught sales for many years. That was my transition out of academics. And, there are various levels of sales. There's transactional sales for small dollars and do it over and over and drive everybody nuts. And there's mid-level where you try to do some planning. That's what plan giving evolved into, a little bit of knowledge and do it over. And then there's something that's called discernment based, which basically is relationship based, where you try to become that person's trusted advisor and do what's right for them. And fundraisers can play that role just as much as advisors can, sometimes better, depending what the motivation is. But
Well,
the organization has to be willing to support it, and you have to have the right clients, you have to have the right donors. You can't waste this, even though every human soul is equal. If you spend hours and hours with someone who's capable of giving only a small gift, you will eventually lose your job and replaced by somebody else who's more brisk.
that's right. Well, that of course brings up another pain point of those who have and those who have less, and how much we have to focus on those who have. But what we know without a doubt in the world, that with gift planning, those who have less can give more. I remember Peggy Welch, also from the hospital.
Yeah.
She was the volunteer cart lady with the pink coat, and she didn't have two sticks to rub together, but guess what she did have? A house. Her husband had died, her son had died, and the head of the volunteer services said to me, I think you should speak with Peggy. And I had a lovely long conversation with Peggy, and she was, poor as a church mouse, as I think she said.
Gosh.
But she never forgot the conversation. She did her estate plans, and when she died, her house went to the hospital. The hospital got 80,000. It wasn't 800,000.
Right.
It wasn't 8 million.
It certainly justified the conversation.
I mean, from her, and I made a nice plaque in the emergency room for her. I mean, there is opportunity there. Phil, I'd like to focus on this piece about the advisors, and also the piece that you asked about what does success mean, and how do you get to success? And my answer is inspiration.
Right.
One of the ways that I spoke with advisors was as humans. And so that I would provoke, that word again, their own inspiration point in their own humanity.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. And I think that's a very important point. I think it's probably the most important point. And if there were many more people, if this was like the beginning of my getting to know a group who was coming together for a camp, I think what you really want to get at is what is their seat at the table as far as professional role, but then what drew them there, because it may well not be their professional role. And I'll just give you a very specific example of what you just said, playing it back to you and spinning it. But this was a group in Pittsburgh, and I'll never forget it, the Pittsburgh Community Foundation. And it was one of the earliest study groups. And I still see the faces, and I see who was sitting where and what they said and all that. And there was one guy who was, maybe at 11 o'clock around the table. And he was Merrill Lynch, and he had perfectly coiffed hair. I mean, it was like not a hair out of order. And he had the dark suit, the pinstripe suit. He had the French cuffs with gold cufflinks. Okay. I mean, whoa. I mean, I felt pretty intimidated. And he's perfect posture, it was all there. He looked like he was running for office. And I made the assumption he was there because he thought he could make a buck out of it. And I said, this is going to be kind of a tough battle here, because I'm not so sure this is lucrative. Anybody who looks that successful can probably be making more money doing something else. And maybe he's trying to manage the funds for the community foundation. Well, we went around the table a couple of times, was your seat at the table. And the second time was, other organizations you're involved with, do you have a charitable engagement? And he said, yeah, I mean, I serve on the board of this school for autistic kids because my daughter is autistic. And I'm hoping I can learn something I can use to help them raise more money. And then one of the other advisors said, oh my gosh, my kid goes to the same school and she's autistic too. And the whole room changed. It just completely changed from success is, making more money, as an imagine from Merrill Lynch or UBS or the other guy, to helping the autistic kids. And at that point, the room came alive, and we actually had a reason for being there.
Right, that was a point of total inspiration, but also another piece that you've invoked repeatedly here, which is connection, engagement, community. And, okay, we have the online situation now coming out of the pandemic where people are fundraising via Zoom now, right? We're having to do our work. And I'm hoping that we'll slowly come back into our full human bodies in the work of philanthropy. But that type of connection that was made by one question that I think you said you asked them, do you have any charitable engagement?
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Right.
These,
You're professionals, but you're also a human being and a citizen, a mother and a father. And, so what is your human reason for being here? And when they respond to that, it just changes completely. Everything changes.
well, getting them to the table, in the case of my legacy council of advisors, I got them to the table because I offered them information about something that affects them personally and 100% of their clients, and that is anything health related. Anything the hospital or health related.
I hear you. I think one thing I've learned, I think, is hopeful and unexpected. If you appeal to people, what's best in people, you do get a response. And when you talk about success, I mean, when I was first involved in getting these study groups together, the very first one we had was in Dallas. And I'll never forget it because it was such a lesson learned. There was a room full of, very sophisticated advisors and some fundraisers. And it was at the Community Foundation of Texas, and there was a stage, and I was on stage with a microphone and all that. And I pitched as hard as I could what it would do for them and their practice and what it would do for their clients. And then you look at the faces, you can tell you're not making the sale. They were all cordial, they were not hostile, but then again, they're thinking to themselves, A, I'm very successful, and B, if my clients need it, I'd already be doing it. And thank you very much for, the invitation. What's for lunch? And then the fundraiser for the actually it was for a hospital at the time, Janie Grimes, stood up, took the microphone, and she said, everything Phil said is correct, but that's not why we're here. We're here for Dallas. We're going to make Dallas the most generous city in the country. And they literally, it was like the altar call. They lined up, they took out their credit cards, and they waited 15 or 20 minutes to sign up. There was maybe one person who slunk out. The others, we were hoping to get 7 or 8 people. We got 2 groups of 15. We had to actually start a second group because she appealed to what was best of them. And I was appealing to prudence and, help. No, and the people who were there for prudent reads slunk away, and that was just as well. If they were there to advance their practice. So now I'm in the habit of saying, if you're here to learn how to make more money, you're probably in the wrong room. If you're here to talk about making a bigger difference in your community, you're definitely in the right place. And it means you're dealing with a smaller group. You're dealing with the right people. And now I'm modifying that talk a little bit. I'm trying to modify it a little bit to say, if you wish you could do it for nothing, so you give back, you may still be in the right place because we're going to land on how to do this expeditiously in a way that reconciles your ability to make a living. But it's still not motivated primarily by making a buck. Quicker and dirtier ways to do that, or better ways to do that.
Right. Better ways. It's motivated by inspiration. That was the second time I got chills in our conversation when Jenny stood up and said, we're here to make Dallas the most generous community in the country.
Yeah.
And that really tapped into the humanity, as I call it.
In the local community, the place-based philanthropy, the place-based sense of loyalty. Dallas was in the Super Bowl that year, and that's how they thought of it. And I've used that line a lot because it's so effective. And I was in Memphis, Tennessee, at their community foundation trying to get a group together, which it did. And I used the same line about Dallas. And somebody in the back of the room, she raised her hand and she said, "Excuse me, we already are the most generous city. Don't you read the Chronicle?" And she was right.
Don't you read the Chronicle?
Yeah. And she had, Memphis had aced Salt Lake City, Utah. And the reason obviously is tithing, right? I mean, it's tzedakah in your world, that there's a faith-based thing that's still alive, place-based, faith-based. We don't see it much at the national level. We don't think of it that way. But Utah and the Deep South are the most generous parts of the country per capita in terms of not the dollars raised, but the percentage of givers and what percentage of income they give.
Interesting.
So it is interesting. The human side of this, the community side, and the tradition side. I think the other piece that you're
So,
When you say community, there are lots of ways of having community, and one is place, another is faith, another is, and it goes on and on.
what's coming up for me is, the conveners. So I mentioned to you earlier the Harold Grinspoon Foundation, an amazing Jewish philanthropy that is making literally it's life changing for the people served by the organizations this foundation is supporting, with long-term committed planning, which includes incentives for organizations to be involved in sustainability and endowment growth. And so they are a convener. And I met Harold Grinspoon many years ago in Western Massachusetts. One time I interviewed, I think, for the foundation for something. I can't remember what that was about, but I remember because I remember his saying to me, the vision of significant broad impact starts with one human at a time.
Mhm.
And so what you're talking about, the advisors, the gift planning experts, based in institutions, organizations, local agencies, where there's an aspect of this which is convening, and you're doing that with your local study groups. Are you still involved with these local study groups?
Well, I've only been out of my current job so short a period of time. Nobody knows I've even left, basically. So yeah, I have constant contact with many. They're also involved in very close friends. So this is more than a program that I was sponsoring. It was a mission, and they were picking me up on the mission, and they're committed to the mission. So I'm committed to the mission. So yeah, and I'll probably take some of what I'm doing now back to the same groups and have it, present as something they can use to go beyond the talking part. Because what has come out of this as far as, takeaway points for other people, I think one is that people will rally. If you go to the moral high ground and it's sincere and you're aligned with the message, it's not a gimmick. If you speak from what's best in yourself, even today in all the divisions of the country, people will rally to that because they recognize the authenticity and they will want to participate in it, and they will give of their best because you're giving of your best. And I think it's a really, really important point. The thing I've also learned is that at the end of this, there's a desire to stay together. In other words, they're reluctant to join because they're so busy, and when it's over, they want to continue. So I think there's a need for the people who do this kind of work to think it through from the standpoint, not just of what happens if we fail and how to prevent that, but if it does succeed, even exceeds our wildest dreams, how do we capitalize on that and keep it going? So I think the thing really is that after you graduate, what do you do with what you've learned? It's been a ball that's been dropped at the local level. I think it's that. I think it succeeded beyond their ability to anticipate it, and they didn't have ongoing programs for the graduates. They kept them tracking. They were right back to where they started with haphazard, episodic.
Well, they had their own metrics to meet, right?
They did. But now
I
we're
get
close
it.
but it's almost like quitting on the 3-yard line. I mean, it's 1st and 3, and you decide you're going to go back and try and march down the field again. When you get to the point where you've got 25, 30, or 50 advisors who really are inspired and eager to do more, there's got to be something we can do to gear them into action on process. That's what I'm trying to work on, is going back to the same people and saying, can we now apply what you've learned to make a measurable difference and all those sorts of things, but using the CAP principles and not just reverting to slam bam, solicitation.
Right. It's funny, and as we're talking, I was just reminded that because I wanted to say, you and I, we've seen the better side of life, it might be said. So we've also seen the effect of longevity. My work is about creating lifelong, loyal donors.
Right.
And that's where you really get that the delicious juice, and like you just said before, in some cases, not loyal to me. They're not my donors. I don't receive gifts, but to the organization, the institution. I'm reminded of my own client. I mentioned to you, I've been working with them for 11 years. And the woman who brought me on as the consultant, who was vice president at that time, is long beyond past president. Now she's on the board of the national organization, but she's still coming to the monthly committee meetings,
Right.
which I've been coming to for monthly for 11 years.
Yeah.
And so there's something about this that's coming up for me and what you're saying, going back to the same people, apply what you've learned. It's no longer about tests and exams and initials after your name. But honestly, I've used the word humanity several times here today, Phil.
What was your original background? What had, before you bailed out of, at age 21, what were you hoping you were going to be?
I was going into American-Israeli relations.
Oh my word.
Yeah, so I created the first Jewish studies degree at Mount Holyoke College, my alma mater.
Okay,
And
that's what I was looking for, the humanities background. Because, I think, it's kind of like the meek shall inherit. It's taking a long time, but I think we're on path to finally inherit. Because when I'm teaching the advisors, this is again encouraging news for you. Okay. When you talk about humanity or the humanities or all the so-called softer disciplines governed by the muses and the graces, and from the standpoint of some people sissy disciplines, it turns out that they are the missing piece in higher order selling. And I'm actually in the position where I'm trying to train people who are, let's say their median client size is 50 million and up. Okay. And they got there by being really good at forming a superficial relationship, demonstrating a product and closing like crazy, sometimes over the phone. Okay. So they're transactional people with great sales skills. And now all of a sudden they're being asked to play the role of the trusted advisor. And you're trying to take a 50-year-old hard-boiled person who basically got a job where they had to call down a list of phone numbers given to them or come up with their own, to give a phone list to call on. And if they don't close X number of people that day, they don't eat. That's how they come up through that system. Okay.
right.
And now 50 years, 30 years later, you're trying to train them how to have a quasi-humane or spiritual conversation with somebody. They've never had it with themselves. And they've developed a shell so thick because they've taken so much rejection, that the idea, you talk about the confidence coach and all that, part of that is vulnerability and acknowledging your own vulnerability. Men, I think, find it harder than women, but particularly hard-boiled people who never lose. I mean, they feel no pain because they're numb. They put their fist to the wall every single day with rejection. So we're trying to retrain these people to be humanists. And all we can do is teach them the lines, and they come across, frankly, to be blunt, like pickup lines by the time you're done. You can teach them the questions, but it's like a pickup line and they have no idea what to do with the answer. And if you ask a follow-up question, it's often obtuse and it often goes in a bad direction because they don't have the tact to back off. I'll just give you a concrete example to kind of get the feel of it. What's your first memory of money? Or what's your first memory? Nice soft question, you're trained to use it. Here's the answer. My first memory of money is somebody who's now worth millions and they're running business. I'm probably 5 years old. I'm sitting on this sofa outside our house. My mother's sitting beside me. We've lost the house and we're about to be living on the streets. That's my first memory of money. So what do you do with that? They're not qualified. They're not trained, and whatever they do next is going to be wrong. If they don't have the instincts, the humane instincts, whatever they do next is going to be wrong. So what I'm trying to say is, I think what I am learning, what I'm discovering, is much easier to take a humanities person who really has the instincts and backfill as much technical as needed to make them capable of carrying the tune with that multi-millionaire, billionaire kind of person, and bring in the technicians as subcontractors. This is demoting the attorneys. It's demoting the CPAs. It's demoting the Merrill Lynch people. It's demoting the UPS people. And they're trying to maintain control by hiring people like you to be the point person. But now you've got control of the big guy's case. And the question is, how does he you've got trust now. So this is the dynamic today. And, I think where people have these skills in the fundraising world, there's a really important role they can play because they do natively what other people, it's like watching somebody sing karaoke. You can't sing. It hurts to hear So anyway, I'm speaking from the heart here because my original background was humanity. So I'm not making this stuff up or channeling somebody else. It's how I think and how I feel.
Well, I mean, earlier I just shared about how I fell into the fundraising career, and that was basically what you just said. Professor Tickton, not that he wasn't a career fundraiser, he was a board member of that organization on campus, and as such and he was old then. He was probably my age, but he was old then, so he had been doing this for a long time. Those were the exact words he said to me. He said you have the skills and characteristics and personality.
No, that's exactly right. And I think it's exactly right. And for what it's worth, if you think about this, if you were able to design a Jim Langley system that would be of real service to you and Jim Langley, think about that level of skill, or Robert Sharp and Charlie Collier and people of that caliber. The issue really is you can form that really strong relationship based on a soul connection, if you want to put it that way, and tact and compassion and concern, if you're given the time, which you're not. But then once you have that, the next step for this person may be extraordinarily complex, and it may be almost entirely largely financial and partly familial. So the person you're discussing this with may own, franchises. They may own S corporations. They may own raw land.
Offshore stock. I had those conversations.
Right. And they've got kids in the business, kids out of the business. They're on a second marriage. They've got all this complexity. What is your next move? If you're a fundraiser, your next move is to put them into some kind of a pipeline and ask them for money. Well, the problem is you're asking them for 2%, asking them for cash from 2% of their assets. And the other stuff is S corporation stock, it's oil and gas leases, it's stuff your gift acceptance committee will not accept. And furthermore, what's holding them back is they don't want to sell in the first place because this is their life. This is their life as a business owner. And also, their kids who are in the business. And so we're now entering into the most profitable part of financial services. What you've opened up is the most important and profitable part of business for New York Life, Merrill Lynch, UBS, Wells Fargo. You are right in their payoff zone. And the bigger return is the bigger CPAs.
Yeah.
You will not refer to them. Okay. Because if you do, you're referring to one of several. You'll offend the others. You got some on the board. There's so many reasons you cannot and will not do that. That's the missing piece. Okay, you've got the skills to do it. I should be training the Merrill Lynch people to disintermediate you. I can't do that. I can't do that because they will never be able to sing on pitch. They will never be able to carry the tune. They will not be able to sing on pitch. All they can do is fake the first question. I've got so many stories. This is it's a major issue in the field. We've got to be able to bring the client around all of these bases, some which are family, some which are financial, back to what really matters. And the fundraisers have the best sense of what matters, but they don't have the tools. You've got the tools to slam a tool here, slam a tool there. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about slamming a CRT into this. We're talking about doing an overall plan that may take 3 years. That will result in their exiting the business. So anyway, that's kind of like what I'm working on. But the sign of hope is, even the big financial firms are hiring people with your backgrounds. You believe it or not. I mean, a quick story just to almost amusing. This was a woman I've known for years from social justice work, and very, charming, energetic. Gifted woman and really a friend. And she took my courses, to kind of get deeper into this kind of planning. And I got a call from the tax attorney teaching the tax and tools course. And she said, I don't know where you found this woman, but I will not return her phone calls. She asked me what capital gain is. And if that's the kind of person you're recruiting, you're not doing your job. Okay. I'm not going to tell what capital, let her Google it. Okay. Turns out, she's a good friend of Jay Hughes, who's like the guru for the world's wealthiest.
I know Jay Hughes, yeah.
So she's a good friend of his. She is now running a zone for Wells Fargo as their consultant with their wealthiest families.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why is she doing it? Because she's from Hawaii. Her original training was native dance in Hawaii. She went to New York where she was a modern dancer. At the age of 30, she just wowed everybody because of her just giftedness. She was electric. And she's got the best people skills you could ever possibly find in a human being: charm and wit and grace and tact. And she establishes rapport with every generation of the family immediately. Okay. That's what Merrill Lynch and these people are hiring. They're hiring the humanists. Okay. So I don't know, and I'm not sure that's good or bad. As I said to her, it's good for you to make a living, but what are your metrics? How are they going to measure your success in doing this? And do they line up with your sense of what needs to be done?
I mean, going back to come full circle, and I think we'll begin to bring it to a close here. What you're talking about is really a partnership. So it's really, there needs to be conveners. You're a convener. I don't know if you're familiar with the Purposeful Planning Institute, but that's where I met.
I've been a member for a while, yeah.
Right, John A. And I met Jay Hughes and many other people who do care about this, who are talking about this. And there's still work to be done, but
that is their world. That is their world. But if you were to ask how many fundraisers are in personal planning people, next to nobody. I would say
next to none. I went for 5 years to their conference, but I stopped going. So there's convening, there's partnering. I'm wondering, again, maybe a conversation for another time, if there's an opportunity with younger generations in the planning field who do experience life differently than those people who are into their late 50s, 60s you're talking about.
I think there's some truth to that, but I think you also just have to look at the ice cold numbers. The boomers have almost all the money. The silent generation has a diminishing slice that's going to the boomers. Of course. And every generation after that is like no more than 15, 20%. And once you get past millennials, you can't see the numbers anymore. So there is, I think the way that comes in is in the family work where dad and mom are in their 70s and they're worth X dozens of million. And they're having to navigate the family dynamics of changing psychology. And so, an example, I'll give you a quick example, which really made it vivid to me, and I've never forgotten it. This is a family office in California that some go through CAP. And their family office has a number of people in it to do philanthropy. And the woman I met who was head of that unit was a probably 55-year-old ex-partner with one of the big CPA firms. Very good people skills, but obviously very, very good with money. And she was giving a talk with two other women who worked for her. And one was like 32 and the other was 22. Okay. And it was a panel about how they do their work. And I was so fascinated by the things they said and how good they were. And I went and talked to her afterwards and said, this is really remarkable what you're doing. What is your philosophy behind it? And she said, it's very straightforward. I work with the parents and I pair one or the other two up with the kids, depending on the age of the kids. Yeah. And when the younger women go in to work with the second generation, they say, mom and dad have so-and-so as their financial advisor. I'm yours. Do you want to order pizza?
Yes.
Okay. And so what's happening there is mom and dad can't talk to the kids about all that stuff for all the reasons that are so hard, but they're talking to another representative of the same firm.
Yes.
So when the people within that firm, within the confines of confidentiality and everything, begin to gear things together, now they can bring the mom and dad together with the kids in a more constructive way because both are represented. It's not the kids who are being dominated by the parents anymore. Now they have representation, they get their voice heard. So I thought that was absolutely brilliant. So I think there was definitely a rationale. I realized that there are small gifts and so forth for younger people and how important it is to keep the traditions alive. But I think the real opportunity right now is the concentration of wealth at the high end and the need for humane planning forward and multi-generational perspectives.
And multi-generational benefit.
Right.
I mean, that's the end game. It's humanity, it's the earth, it's our world. And I don't think that, I'm being melodramatic here. So I think that
it is. I think that's all true. I think all that's true. And I think, we start out talking, the title of this time together is Connect the Conversations of Philanthropy, or really the conversations of humanity, of which philanthropy is one, of caring and love and concern. with kindred spirits. And that's what makes this work, I think, so fulfilling. You know, it doesn't have to be, we all belong in so many different communities. Some are local, some are faith-based, some are colleges and universities and hospitals. They're all little hubs of community, and love circulates and money circulates, and money is a proxy for love. And you told the story of somebody whose love exceeded her financial means, but even her example is part of the gift back, because it changed other people and realized if she can give all, I can give 1%, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Oh my gosh, I just want to say I just got chills again because when you've been doing this a long time, the donors who are long gone are passing before my eyes right now. That's
yeah,
really honestly happening. I could
mhm,
tell you stories of their passion, of how they thanked
yeah,
me. I was
right,
just a conduit, how they thanked me for the opportunity. It is the evolution of
mhm,
how I got to do my work
right,
as I teach it in
right,
consulting and coaching
exactly.
and
Yeah, but
whatever. And, another one, Mort Zelikovsky, he was worried about the $1,000 pill. He never had children. He
yeah,
thanked me over coffee and cookies twice a
mhm,
week.
yeah.
And
Well,
that's the end game.
it's that gratitude, love and grace and gratitude. I think there really is. I was raised Catholic, but I think every tradition basically says that God loved us enough to do all this for us, and we're expected to pay it forward, pay it back, or pay it around to participate in the body of this community as one cell among many, sustained by love. I mean, that is how I was raised, and that's what I feel. I can't get past it. But I wanted to just introduce the thing that made you even do this, which was conversations of love, care, and concern, philanthropy with kindred spirits and others. And I think what we're unfortunately having to butt up against here is increasingly communities are polarized against each other. Political parties, Trump people, Fox News, versus MSNBC, and generations. And I mean, we seem to be entering an era with social media and other things are so inflaming our hatreds on behalf of partisan ends. Anti-Semitism. I mean, the rise of anti-Semitism, and that you would not have thought that's possible. I would not have thought. The racism I knew, okay, but I did not think we were going to go through another era of anti-Semitism.
Oh, it's real. It's here.
Virulent. It's real and it's virulent. And what I'm really trying to say is, I'm coming at this from a literary philosophical perspective. I had to go back to really the depth of that to understand what's going on. And I think it's simply the case that when you have love, care, and gratitude, when you have community facing inward and forming a circle, that circle has to be defended. And the way it's defended is with ostracization, stoning, crucifying, wars, intolerance, brutality, hatred, propaganda. And I find it really, really difficult these days to go into a room. If this was 25 people here, we had this conversation, I think the very first thing I would have done is to try and get an articulation, get an intuition. Is this a safe space for me personally? Or do I have to code shift into unreadable as to politics? Okay. Because if I have to do that, I will do that. And I do that very often. But how much of myself can I bring to a space where I am going to be detested and hated for certain things that I do automatically when I let myself go? Because it's triggering somebody's ideology, and that they then have to ostracize me, stone me, crucify me in order to make their bones with their peers. I think we're all finding this more and more often, and it's making us, I think, guarded in the way we have these conversations, unless you only work with kindred spirits defined in such a way that, but even then, good luck with that, because you just don't know when you probe a little bit.
Also true. Now we're into my coaching territory, and creating a safe and sacred space online is something that I have been working on for many years. And but I don't kid myself. You step into it very easily, and you can't know. And part of it is from all what's coming. I call it under the line. Beneath the line, beneath the surface of all the things going on.
Right.
So this is crazy, fantastic conversation. I got down a couple of gems that there's good news, there's hopefulness, what does success mean, and all of that. And I want to thank you so much for
It's been
coming
fun.
to this
I really enjoyed it.
conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sharing your world of expertise. I'm encouraged by what you say about the people who are in the humanities are being sought out to help provide for humanity.
Yes, they are. So
yeah.
I think that's a very, very good positive sign. Now we just have to live up to what's best in the humanities traditions.
Exactly so.
Yeah.
All right, Phil, well, we're going to end here, and I will look forward to the next conversation with Kindred Spirits and others.